All right, let's dive into one of the most compelling and, let's face it, confusing stories of our time. We're talking about impossible technology, decades of official secrecy, and what happens when our most advanced defense systems run into something they just can't explain. This is the story of UAPs.
So let's set the scene. The year is 2004. You've got the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group. We're talking one of the most sophisticated naval fleets on the entire planet, operating off the coast of San Diego. And then, their sensors start picking up something that's going to change this whole conversation forever.
The crews tracked this thing they nicknamed the Tic Tac, and it was performing maneuvers that just shouldn't be possible. Think about this. It could go from a dead hover to hypersonic speeds in the blink of an eye, all with no wings, no exhaust, no visible means of propulsion at all. Oh, and it can move seamlessly from the air right into the ocean. This wasn't just some blurry photo. This was a physics-defying event, confirmed by multiple top-of-the-line sensor systems. And really, this one encounter, the Nimitz case, is what dragged the whole UAP topic out of the fringe and forced it right into the mainstream. The evidence was just too good, too credible for the national security world to keep ignoring it. You know, what makes this case so rock solid is who the witnesses were. This wasn't a random sighting. We're talking about elite Navy fighter pilots like Commander David Fravor. These are people whose entire job is to identify anything and everything in the sky. They saw it with their own eyes, and their incredibly advanced radar and infrared systems saw the exact same thing. So you might be wondering, was the Nimitz incident just a one-off, a total fluke? Not even close. Turns out, it was just the latest chapter in a story of official engagement and public secrecy that the government has been wrestling with for more than 75 years.
The whole history of this thing is this constant tug-of-war between official interest and public denial. You could say it all kicks off with Roswell in 1947, when the military announces a flying disc and then snatches it back just hours later, creating this foundation of mistrust that lasts for decades. That leads to official studies like Project Blue Book, which is then followed by a long, long silence, until the 2017 bombshell from the New York Times revealed the Pentagon had been secretly studying UAPs the whole time.
And that brings us to a really crucial point about that early effort, Project Blue Book. See, it basically had two conflicting missions. Publicly, its job was to debunk sightings and calm everybody down. But behind the scenes, it was supposed to be doing genuine scientific investigation. And that created this fundamental tension right from the very beginning.
So, after analyzing more than 12,000 cases, how good was Project Blue Book at explaining everything away? Well, not perfect, because at the end of it all, a core mystery was left over. And that mystery comes down to a single number, 701. Those were the cases that the Air Force itself couldn't solve, the ones that remained truly, stubbornly unidentified.
And if you thought the government's interest just dried up when Blue Book closed in '69, well, think again. From 2007 to 2012, the Pentagon secretly poured millions into a new program called ATIP. The budget, a cool $22 million. This was the proof, the hard evidence, that behind the public denial, the national security world was taking this phenomenon very, very seriously.
Okay, so beyond the secret programs and the history, there's a much deeper question here. Why? Why does this topic have such an incredibly powerful grip on our imagination? The answer, I think, is that the whole phenomenon acts as a kind of Rorschach test for our society.
At the heart of why we're so fascinated is this powerful psychological force called cognitive dissonance. I mean, think about it. On one hand, for decades, the official story was nothing to see here, folks. But on the other hand, you have decorated military pilots saying, no, we saw something that broke the laws of physics. That huge mental gap creates a vacuum, and we rush to fill it with speculation, belief, and of course, intense debate.
You know, the sociologist Diana Pasulka has this fascinating take on it all. She suggests that in our mostly secular, tech-driven age, UAPs have kind of stepped into the role that myths and religion used to play. They represent something so far beyond what we can do, so far beyond our understanding, that they feel almost magical, a modern encounter with what she calls the technological sublime.
And all of this brings us to today, which is where the most dramatic shift of all has happened. The conversation about UAPs has moved from the shadowy corners of the internet and late-night radio shows, and it's walked right into the halls of Congress.
And here is the absolute key to this whole modern shift. It's the reframing of the question. People in power are no longer debating little green men. Instead, they're asking a much more practical and urgent question. What are these things in our restricted airspace? who's flying them, and what can they do. The whole issue has been officially recast as a matter of national security.
This pivot to national security wasn't random. It was formalized through a series of official steps. First, a task force was set up to get all the data in one place. Then came public congressional hearings, which made it okay to talk about this stuff out in the open. Crucially, whistleblowers were given legal protection to come forward with what they know. And finally, a permanent Pentagon office, AARO, was created to lead the investigation. This is the official structure that's in place right now to tackle the mystery.
So, the billion-dollar question. What could these things actually be? Well, expert opinions are pretty much split into three main camps. You've got the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which folks like Harvard's Avi Loeb are exploring. Then there's the more skeptical view that says these are mostly misidentifications or maybe some super-secret human tech. And then you have the more exotic interdimensional idea from researchers like Jacques Vallée, who suggests these things might be coming from a reality that coexists with our own.
But you know, when you step back from all the debate about sensor data and what's flying around up there, this whole phenomenon becomes something much more profound. It's become a mirror held right up to us.
And so what do we see when we look in that mirror? Well, regardless of what UAPs actually are, our reaction to them reveals pretty much everything about us.
We see our complicated relationship with secrecy in government. We see our anxieties about technology we don't understand. And we see two of our deepest, most fundamental emotions: the profound hope that we are not alone in this universe and the terrifying fear that we are.
You know, maybe the most hopeful thing to come out of all this is how the conversation is finally growing up. For the first time, really on a large scale, we're starting to move past that dead-end question of, do you believe? And we're starting to ask a much more powerful, much more scientific question: what does the data show?
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. For centuries, the possibility of being alone, or not, has driven our art, our science, our philosophy. If tomorrow we got a definitive answer, one way or the other, do you think humanity would feel relieved? Or would we, just maybe, feel a little lost without one of our greatest and most enduring mysteries?